Welcome back. By very, very popular demand, today we are taking a look at a game called Vintage Story. Finally, this has been on my list for the better part of half a year now. My initial impressions of it are good. I have no idea what's going on here, but it looks like three witches have turned the moon into a pumpkin demon, which is always a good sign for Goose-compatible levels of jank. I also feel like I should preface this by saying that I know precisely nothing about this game, aside from the fact that it's kind of like Minecraft, and apparently there are eldritch monsters, which in my mind translates to, oh look, it's an RLcraft reboot, but you all probably would have realized that pretty quick anyway. So let's dive right in. After a lovely little intro sequence wherein I get to listen to some banging elevator music and watch the game engine spit out world rendering status updates disguised as lore, we get to create our character. In the interests of not wasting 3 hours, I skip my usual pattern of making my character look as much like a goose as humanly possible and keep myself as the default commoner class. I'm sure there are good and bad classes to pick, but without knowing in advance what I'm going to spend most of my time doing, it seems best not to commit to anything. This strategy works in real life as well. With that out of the way, let's get playing. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say playing? I meant fixing my game settings. Alright, now we can get playing. The first step in any Minecraft-like game is, much like in real life, to immediately start punching things and seeing what can be stolen. I also confirmed that yes, I can in fact break the terrain, and I am helpfully informed that the resulting block of dirt I get from that experiment is low fertility, which seems like a really personal topic to discuss 2 seconds after meeting, but I won't judge. Awkward conversations like this are why I never touch grass. What I can't do, however, is punch trees. Or rather, I can, it just doesn't do anything other than exacerbate my carpal tunnel. Instead, I can punch leaves to get sticks, which other than the sticks, also does absolutely nothing to convince me that this isn't RLcraft and is a concerning omen of things to come. Because without exception, Minecraft mod packs and reboots that don't let you punch trees universally seem to take their realism mechanics a bit too seriously, so I will no doubt have to spend another 20 minutes finding flint or something before anything interesting happens. Oh look, 20 minutes later, I found flint. In defiance of the traditional crafting archetype of just wang it on the ground until it magically turns into the thing you want, Vintage Story makes you place the flint on the ground and then cut out the shape you want, which is simultaneously a really neat little mechanic and also utterly unrealistic and will get very, very annoying if I have to do it in bulk, but that is a future Goose problem. This magically constructed flint knife blade is then magically inserted into a stick with the power of engineering, and lo and behold, I have a flint knife. Plants everywhere shall fear my name. Following the questbook, I then spend a rather substantial amount of time personally investing in this fear economy by doing my level best to extinctify cattails in the name of inventory management via many baskets that I sadly did not weave underwater, but I did weave in the middle of a swamp, so I think it counts. I'm somehow able to simultaneously carry 4 of these, despite only having 2 arms. The guide only had me make 1, of course, but let's be real here, we all know that with my inventory management being what it is, additional storage space is less of a requirement and more of a religious calling. What then follows is a lovely little adventure where I wander aimlessly for the rest of the day, beating the daylights out of fish, because food is important, I couldn't find berries if they leapt out of a manhole cover and bit me in the rear end, and animal cruelty is pretty much just a tradition on this channel. It's also only until later that I realized cattail roots were another food option that would have been a fair bit easier to obtain, but frankly, feckless fish felching is a lot more interesting to say than cumbersome cattail cutting, so bite me. This is also where I discover that the wildlife here hates me. For the life of me, I can't imagine why, but I can only conclude it might have something to do with the pockets full of fish that I'm carrying around on my person. Either way, said wildlife is also strongly lacking in that special sauce we like to call object permanence, so it isn't too much of a problem to avoid. Yet, that's gonna change. Once I have finally collected enough technically edible things, looking at you, poisonous mushrooms, to progress the quest, I am helpfully informed that, oh yeah, you should probably make an axe and do the survival thing. I do that, beat some trees down with the power of Rock on Stick Mark II, and spend several minutes aggressively rubbing my hands together and thinking warm thoughts at a pile of wood. Amazingly, this works just in time to discover that the local wildlife is both A, extremely hangry, and B, not in the least bit intimidated by the pinnacle of caveman wood-rubbing technology. Thinking quickly, I adopt the time-honored Homo sapien tradition of running away from things that want to eat me really fast before I then apply my brain power to the solution and remember that much like in Minecraft, water imparts a significant mobility debuff whenever you're inside it. I then table the turns on Miss Piggy, lure her into the mysterious blue goo, and start beating her to death with a stone axe before she up and runs away like a little rat coward. I gave chase, but Piggy is unfortunately faster than me, so it looks like bacon isn't going to be on the menu for tonight. That's fine, though. With all this water around, Kermit is bound to be here somewhere. Speaking of which, I'm starving to death. Go-Go Gadget, fish combustion. Yeah, that restores, like, no food. Okay, wow, this is gonna be an issue, I see. In fact, it's rather more of an issue than I thought. It isn't even midnight yet, and I've already burned through most of my 6 fish worth of food, forcing me to go out foraging in the middle of the night or risk a humiliating death by starvation, not even 30 minutes into the game. The good news is that I do seem to be healing from my earlier altercation of the porcine paradigm, albeit slowly, which I rather suspect is part of the reason my food bar is going down so quickly. The bad news is that the only convenient source of food I have access to right now is cattails, and I just pitched my torch into the river. Did I mention it's dark? Yeah, it's really, really dark. By the time I get back to my fire, I am nearly starving to death, again, and have largely run out of anything flammable, so before anything useful can happen, I have to make like a lawnmower and gather up bundles of what has got to be sopping wet grass at this point to use as fuel for the fire. The smoky flavor adds character to the meal. And also charcoal. So, if my first night has taught me anything, it's that this is one of those games that assumes that you have the metabolic requirements of an average Formula 1 race car, which is less than ideal for those of us who would like to do anything other than extinctify the world of anything vaguely edible. Unfortunately, it's the world we live in, so rather than do anything more productive with my time, I spend my next morning chopping down every tree I stumble across, digging up every cattail I find, and brutally myrtleizing every poor helpless aquatic creature to get in my way, simply because they are the only thing I found that doesn't fight back. Conveniently, I also found several berry bushes along the way, which went quite a ways to keep me from starving to death on this adventure, but is most likely not going to be sustainable. I also found a dead hen on the way back, which normally you would think to be a good thing if it weren't for the description saying that it was partially charred due to a lightning strike. The implication here being that if lightning can strike a chicken, it can also strike me. Sure, free meat is good and all, but my personality is already perfectly electrifying, and I would very much not like any help in further enhancing it from local weather phenomena. Speaking of which, it's been raining basically non-stop since I arrived. Now, I like rain as much as any self-respecting individual, which is to say plenty well when I don't have to walk around in it, but the whole lightning thing does remind me that I should probably get some sort of shelter set up. Now that I am no longer in danger of expiring from an insufficiently stocked buffet table, I can afford to spend some time doing this, so I crafted a shovel and started engaging in the time-honored tradition of making my very first Minecraft house by digging a whopping great big hole in the ground and piling dirt up to call it a roof. I was going to try and make a real house with real blocks and stuff, but all of them were too expensive at this point, so it's basically logs or dirt for me, and all my logs are earmarked for cooking at the moment, so dirt hovel it is. After perusing the in-game guides for a bit while my cattail roots roast in the background, I decide that my next port of call is going to be trying to find some clay. Naturally, it is the middle of the night when I decide this, which seems like a very poor time to do this sort of thing, but I have the will to persevere and also a combusting stick, so it should be fine. My first find is turnips, which I don't really know enough to know if they're good or not, but given the issues I've been having with food and my steadily depleting supply of local cattails, seem likely to be important once I can figure out how to stick them back in the ground and make more of them. My second find is flax, which if anything is more important than turnips, because if there is one constant with these survival-type open-world games, it is their unholy obsession with anything that proximally resembles cordage. It isn't finished growing yet, so I mark it for later, and if plant growth cycles are anything to go by, I am a ways off from winter yet, so hopefully I will have time to grow it up before my bits start freezing off due to chronic textile shortages. The third, fourth, and fifth finds are peat, peat, and peat, respectively. The stuff says it burns hotter than firewood, and also longer, so I have a sneaking suspicion I will need it here in a bit for firing clay or forging copper or something, but for now it's gonna basically be surrogate firewood, because using sopping wet peat on a fire that I dug up literally out of a stream not 5 minutes ago in an enclosed area is definitely going to be a safe and healthy decision when it comes to maintaining air quality. I also found more electrocuted chickens, which is actually very concerning, because how common do lightning strikes have to be to randomly hit a bunch of chickens twice within, like, the same hour? Pretty darn common, is my guess, unless chickens are secretly wired to a radio tower or something. And finally, I found a bear. Or, more accurately, a bear found me, liked what it saw, and decided to try and make a move. While I would like to think I'm an open-minded individual and willing to try anything once, I soon discovered that getting bitten by a bear doesn't really do it for me, so I slid back home to plug my leaks with several dozen roast cattail roots and a couple of charred chicken steaks. Suitably fortified against the dangers of overly aggressive hairballs, I set out again on the morning searching for elusive dirt products, and am likewise met with a complete lack of success. Mind you, I do find other cool things, like a kind of rocky mountainous biome dealio, and what looks like an underwater cave thing that I am absolutely not stepping in because that seems like an excellent way to die. But for the most part, I just find bears. Lots and lots of bears, to the point where I get killed by one, respawn, wander around for like 2 minutes, and then get chased back from my spawn point all the way home by a second. Not entirely sure what is going on with him here, but Winnie really needs to relocate his poo stick or something, because I'm not a jar of honey and would very much appreciate not being opened up like one. If nothing else, my adventures with Smokey the Sadomasochist do yield unexpected benefits in the form of free exploration that I get to do every time I get killed and have to run back to pick up my stuff, and on one of those trips I stumbled across a deposit of red clay, which is the stuff I was looking for the whole time, right next door to my house. Putting aside the fact that if it were a snake, I would be a mildly toxic pincushion at this point, I immediately mobilize out with high-quality rock-on stick technology to begin excavating this valuable resource. I have no idea how much fancy dirt I will need, but if Greg Tech New Horizons has taught me anything, it's that when the game spawns in lumps of resources measured several dozen meters across, it usually does that because it intends for you to need them, so I settle on a nice starting sum of an entire basket full of the stuff. After all, there's no such thing as too much pottery, and anyone who tells you otherwise is full of crock. Before I can begin with that, however, I have to make another withdrawal from the bank of cattail carbohydrates, because all of that adventuring has quite handily depleted what little spare food I was able to gather from my earlier exploration. And the eternal void that is my belly is doing the thing where it is empty and threatens to kill me if I don't fill it with something. There are still plenty of plants around here to crunch on, so no worries, but when I was out harvesting, I did find whatever this thing is. Now, I don't know about you, but when I see a random hole torn in reality, my first instinct is to stick parts of my body into it, which the game helpfully informs me is a bad thing to do by making my screen go sepia-toned and giving the green gear next to my health bar a good yank. According to the guide, this is a bad thing, and indicates that I'm exposing myself to some mechanic that I wasn't really paying attention to that boils down to don't drink the spoopy juice or monsters will happen. I'm already getting more attention from the local bear community than I'm comfortable with, and something tells me that beating off an eldritch incursion with a flint knife and a whole lot of clay isn't a particularly great plan, so we're just gonna leave it alone for now. Cool. First step of clay throwing, dig out a buttload of peat. Clay vessels obviously need to be fired, otherwise you just get a bunch of sticky dirt in the shape of a bowl, which does not help anyone. Peat, also, can I just say called it, by the way, is pretty good at solving that sticky dirt problem because it is very, very flammable. Somehow, despite the constant non-stop rain that hasn't let up since I started the game. Apparently, charcoal is the fastest way of firing a vessel, but I have a life and a bunch of peat that I'm not doing anything with, so the local tree population gets to live to grow another day. I also found another thunderstruck rooster. This is the 5th thus far, and at this rate, if I try and do any animal husbandry, I'm going to need to mass-produce rubber bodysuits for the livestock first. And speaking of rubber bodysuits, and wow, if that isn't a segue, I don't know what is, did you know that your computer desk is nude? It's true, you don't give it clothes, so by definition, it's completely indecent. Not to worry though, for I have a solution. For the low price of financial contribution, you too can now properly garb your gaming station with a picture of my feathery derriere on an enormous mousepad. If you are interested in this remarkable once-in-a-lifetime, except actually it's twice because this is a reprint opportunity, the information on buying them is in the description. Anyway, next step, throw. Specifically throw the clay, not the game in general, though goodness knows I'm trying the latter as hard as possible. This works basically the same way that flint knapping does, but in reverse, since you are now adding bits of clay into a pattern rather than removing them. I had kind of hoped that you could customize the shape of your containers with this so you could make, like, art or something, but from what I can see, the patterns are pre-built and you just have to assemble them, which definitely isn't going to take 20 years. I feel like if you were working on a huge project or something and it needed a ton of crockery, that this would get very annoying, but for now I only really care about the cookware, so I just crank out a few pieces of whatever sounds useful and call it good. Incidentally, you remember what I was saying about lightning strikes? Yeah, they do strike you. And it hurts, even through a solid meter of dirt that definitely isn't saturated with highly mineralized water from the constant downpour. But anyway, at least I have something to do during the night now. It's cower in terror from the storm, and mush wet dirt with my hands. I'm really glad we live in the 21st century. Once I'm done getting down and dirty with the dishware in Potentia, I take my spoils outside, dig a hole, crack them in, and then cover it in dirt, grass, and sticks and spicy mud before setting it all on fire. The game refers to this as a pit kiln, though the rest of us normal people just call it a campfire in a hole, and it will supposedly take about a day before my stuff is finished burning in their discount Hot Pockets. In the meantime, I then go goat mode and start trimming the jungle that is my backyard. These pits can and will catch things on fire, and they need a bunch of grass to construct anyway, so it makes sense to repurpose the local foliage. Once dawn breaks, I'm back at it again on the food train, although this time around my focus is also partially on shaving bushes to get a hold of a stack of stick. Not knowing what I would need from the clay recipes, I went with the Tinker's Construct approach of just making all of the molds and casts and whatnot so that I'd have them available when I wanted them, which worked great until I realized just exactly how many pit kilns it would take to cook them and how much stuff I would need to light on fire. The food issue, meanwhile, is as ever unceasing, and I'm beginning to suspect that the eldritch horror this game advertised is entirely localized to my GI tract, and keeping it satiated has thus far depleted 4 entire ponds worth of cattails with no signs of stopping. Some people metaphorically say they're so hungry they could eat a horse. In my case, that is a very literal assessment of the situation, and understating it substantially. Still, progress must go on, so while my 5th pond of cattails is cooking up, I get back to slaving away at the fire pits. My earlier bout of sheep impersonation proved insufficient, as each bit of crockery takes 10 grass to cook each, so I defoliate another chunk of the world and pinch it into the pits with all my other hard-worn flammables. By this point, the first round of crock has finished up, and I am now the proud owner of a bunch of dirty, soot-stained bowls and pots and stuff. The jars, at least, offer an improved storage capacity over my reed baskets, though considering my diet is 100% rhizome by volume, mass, and every other metric you care to name, I'm not sure how much bakeware is going to help with the nutritional output. As to be expected, dirty water roots are not part of any nutritious breakfast, lunch, dinner, or midnight snack known to humans, so I'm going to need to look a bit further afield to fill my belly. Conveniently, I'm all out of food sticks and grass again, so that's fine. A foraging trip, again, will do me nicely. The rest of the day passes, dare I say it, peacefully. Either the bear convention has buggered off to parts unknown, or Smokey finally realized that even death isn't enough to stop my irresponsible use of uncontrolled open flames and gave up, but for whatever reason, they leave me alone and I'm free to wander around unmolested. Naturally, I use this as an opportunity to do a little bit of everything. If the crafting menu is anything to go by, I haven't even seen a sliver of what the game has to offer yet, and the first part of unlocking all of that is, unironically, just aimlessly wandering around looking at cool things and picking up stuff. To that end, I gather a bunch more sticks. It won't be enough, but it might at least finish the clay throwing project. Do some foraging so I won't immediately starve to death when I get back home, even if I can't find anything cookable, and mostly just see the sights. It's remarkably relaxing. On my travels, I also encounter more of that mountainous rocky biome I mentioned earlier. Being in it makes me slightly unstable, which is a sensation that I'm very accustomed to, but I mean that in the game context. So I'm not sure if this is a higher level area or whatever, or if it's just an area dependent thing and the biome is unrelated. Either way, I do find a couple ores here that I haven't spotted elsewhere, so I guess I will need to figure that out at some point if I ever need to mine quartz or something. Unfortunately, despite all of the goodies I brought home, not a single one of them is something I can put in a pot and cook for dinner, so in most respects the expedition was a complete and utter failure. That's fine, though. I have a plan. And that plan is to use that giant lump of meat on top of my shoulders for something other than baiting bears. One of the things I do know how to find is mushrooms. In fact, I actually found a couple right at the start of the video. They were just poisonous ones that I presumably cannot safely consume until I cook them or something. Still, there is a great big forest nearby. The guide says that mushrooms like to sprout in forests after rain, and the world has been positively hosing it down harder than a firefighter at a frat party, so I engaged my one remaining orange brain cell and determined that, maybe the forest would be a good place to start to find mushrooms. To my complete and utter surprise, this works perfectly, and in no time flat I have a bunch of vibrantly colored mushrooms that I somehow magically know are safe for human consumption. PSA for you folks, if for some reason you find yourself in the wilderness, don't eat wild mushrooms, even if you are absolutely sure you have identified them correctly. The coloration, growth patterns, and morphology of mushrooms varies wildly among even mushrooms of the same species, so much so that even experienced mycologists get them wrong all the time. Mushrooms' toxicity levels range from entirely harmless to eating this will just kill you, and safe edible mushrooms often end up looking nearly identical to their toxic siblings. Do not eat wild mushrooms. Starvation is safer and more pleasant. So anyway, now that I have a bunch of wild mushrooms, all I need to do to stuff them in my face is to get some meat. And just like that, a wolf throws itself at me, begging me to eat it. Isn't it convenient how that works out? Now, I have had run-ins with wolves before in this game, and they didn't go well, but this time around, I have a plan. And that plan is called Pointy Stick Technology. I can't make a bow just yet because I am too stupid, but what I can do is make a bunch of cheap flint-tip spears. Their range is terrible, their accuracy is worse, but wolves are pretty fast and their pathing is pretty reliable, so all I really need to do is run from the wolf in a straight line, which is also something you shouldn't do in the real world, by the way. Flick back around, chuck a spear in its general direction, and then keep on running. Repeat this a couple more times, and just like that, fresh doggy dinner. I even managed to sneak up on a second wolf and got a stick into it as well. Doggy gave me a runaround for a bit, but after spear number 2 it decided to split, got caught in a wall, and then was promptly introduced to spear number 3, which encouraged it to take a sudden dirt nap. Now, I can't use this meat for soup, apparently, because it's bushmeat, ergo somehow is magically too tough for the cooking pot, despite being fully edible otherwise, but again, that doesn't matter because fish is totally okay, and there are lakes everywhere for me to hit up. With all this bounty, plus a bonus fox that I kind of just stumbled over, sniped with a spear, and then clubbed in the head with an axe when it took objection to my pointed introduction, I come home absolutely loaded with meat. Now I just have to figure out how pots work. After several minutes of flailing around, I realized that you actually have to put stuff in the correct slots, cranked in some mushrooms, waited a bit, and then prepared myself to enjoy a lovely bowl of mushroom fish soup. Individually, these ingredients are worth about 400 calories in total, but cooking them together has upped that to over 1,000, so yeah, this is definitely the way to do it. And then I poisoned myself. Remember how I was saying, hey kids, remember not to eat strange mushrooms? Well, yeah. Hey kids, if your wild mushrooms happen to come with magically identifying flavor text saying that they're poisonous, you should remember to read that as well, and then maybe not put them in your soup. Mind you, it's very tasty soup, so I will definitely be finishing it at a later date, just, well, the less said about the effects on the digestion, the better. This also means that from that entire foraging trip, I only got 2 mushrooms that won't make me poop my pants, so mushrooms are looking less like a viable food source right now. I also spent like 5 minutes trying to put soup in a crock because I grossly misunderstood what crocks were for. They're for pickling, in case you are wondering. You can't just put any old food item in them. In light of my ever-present inventory management issues, I opt to lob together some more storage jars with what little remains of my peat supply. I am very quickly outgrowing the dirt hovel on the prairie. I am very quickly outgrowing my little house on the prairie here, but I still haven't gotten my hands on enough building materials to make a proper house yet, and I don't really want to build out of dirt again because that's just pathetic. So instead I will do nothing about my problems and complain about them, despite having multiple avenues of solving them with a minimum of effort. Ducky would be proud. Since my mushroom munchie plan clearly isn't going to work, it looks like it's time for me to start doing literally any amount of farming whatsoever. Now, I don't have the stuff to make a bucket, which would let me create nice, beautifully optimized farming designs, but I do have the next best thing, which is a giant pond full of water that I have long since extracted anything useful out of and a bunch of fertile soil, so that will do nicely as well. Besides, it wouldn't be a Goose video if I wasn't doing something environmentally problematic, and I think mass excavation of the topsoil and wanton destruction of natural wetland for an entirely unnecessary agricultural complex fits the bill nicely. So with my earth-moving adventure done, I can then get onto the actual farming portion of the farming project. Crops, apparently, attract rabbits, which is phrased as a bad thing, but given my current meat situation seems less like a downside and more like an exploitable game mechanic, but I would still prefer to not lose my seeds, so I slammed down some fences to keep them out before transitioning to playing Extreme Hoe Simulator 2025 Turnip Edition. And in a classic case of perfect timing, I finished up my farm and planted my 5 precious turnip seeds just in time to run out of food again. So with that done, I can then turn right back around and start grubbing around in the wild looking for grub, I guess. I've been keeping my eyes on wild stands of various kinds of vegetables, and now that I know that I can actually plant them, I plan on hitting them up for some seeds to get better agriculture going. This goes fine, and I grab a bunch of good things, including some of the oh-so-vaunted flax that I'm going to need to make linen undergarments later on, but as is typical, I get distracted a few minutes in chasing wildlife all over Heaven's creation in the name of making some good soup. Deer, and as I later find out, boar, both give high-quality red meat when harvested, which is the kind of meat that is compatible with soup making. This, combined with the free fresh vegetables that I have been ripping out of the ground with my bare hands, promises to make for a very happy belly once I get them all cooked up and ready to go. This sudden influx of food couldn't have come at a better time either, because my next tech progression is going to require a whole lot of sitting around and not hunting for things. Specifically, it's time to get myself a pickaxe. Now, the way you are supposed to do this is, in order, explore and then get lucky. I struggle with the latter at times, but were I to not, I would expect to find native copper deposits on the surface that I could harvest for the copper I need for the pick. But for all my exploring, I haven't actually gotten very much of them. That's fine, the devs clearly expected this, so there's another way. Go panning for it on rocky or sandy shorelines. Sounds simple. And it is, but the problem with playing the terrible bootleg version of the classic Halloween game Bobbing for Chicken Nuggets is that, like the original, it is very, very slow, and 50% of what you get from it is an assorted variety of razor blades. I need 40 nuggets to make a tool that will let me mine it like a normal person, and I am averaging maybe 1 per minute, which is less of a ore production strategy and more of a carpal tunnel generator dressed up as a McDonald's fast food worker. I'm sorry, I didn't realize this was a GregTech New Horizons reboot. Would you like fries with that? We're gonna be here a bit. Several hours of tray panning for nuggies later, that's panning for nuggies later, must have gotten a bit of brains mixed up in the ore. Anyway, several hours of hunting down and stapling my few remaining functional brain cells to a corkboard later, and I have utterly destroyed the riverbank, finished off all of my lovely turnip and red meat soup that I spent so long making, and somehow, despite the game's best effort to the contrary, netted myself 4 moldy chicken nuggets with a higher than average mineral content. Fantastic. That was step 1. In defiance of Minecraftian tradition, you cannot smush together nuggets of copper with your bare hands to magically make ingots of copper, or, for that matter, anything at all. This is due to the at times inconvenient property known as a melting point, which is the temperature we need to reach to turn our nuggets into a metal smoothie that can then be coaxed into something vaguely pickaxe-shaped. This requires a material called charcoal. As with everything else interesting in these sorts of games, getting it requires making a giant hole in the ground. That isn't the interesting part. The interesting part is what goes in the hole. It's firewood. Lots and lots and lots of firewood. The game helpfully jokes that it might be best if I chop down an entire forest or two, and I lied. Not about the helpful part, or the forest chopping part, just the joke part. The game was not joking, it was being entirely serious. Each block of fire pit is basically a moderately large tree's worth of wood, magically tetrised into a single cubic meter of space, and me, being the GregTech gigabrain that I am, decided that the recommended starting size was way too small, so we would up it by a factor of 8. Now, could I have just slopped down some dirt back into the hole to solve this "why is the charcoal pit so big" problem? Yeah, sure. I guess, if I was a coward. Making something small sounds like quitter's talk, though, and Mama didn't raise a quitter, so instead I'm forced to engage in the only possible solution to this terrible conundrum and take out some of my repressed anger on the local foliage. For all of its therapeutic benefit, it does, however, take a while, so copper smelting and all that fun and games will have to be something I explore next time. Until then, if you're interested in a mousepad, the information for them is in the description. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed.